So what exactly is a Norwegian welt? What is cool about it? Why is it something that's interesting? And why on earth are there so many options? Well, these are some of the questions we're going to try to take on today, so stay tuned. Hey, I've organized all my playlists on this channel so that you're able to easily find different types of shoes, different brands of shoes, as well as finding all my shoe battles, worth the price shoe reviews, etc., all in one place. Enjoy. Welcome back, and this is going to be a very interesting kind of shoe battle because what I'm going to do in this battle is this is the battle of the Norwegian welts. And I'm not going to look at the shoes in general. I'm going to talk about the sole and I'm going to talk about the welt. And we'll talk a little bit about the brands, but I'm not going to go and focus on is this shoe better than that shoe. I have a number of different styles. I have wingtips, I have split toes, I have an Adelaide, I have suede, I have smooth leather, I have hatch grain, a lot of different variety here today. But what I really want to do is I want to talk about Norwegian welts and what I like about them and what I think they bring to the table. And then we'll talk a little bit about different options that you have when you have a Norwegian welt. So first off, we're going to talk about some machine stitched Norwegian welts. And this is something that's a bit of an anomaly. I think a lot of people think that they're fake welts, but I spent some time and I did some research, and this is a Paraboot Avignon, and Paraboot is known for their Norwegian welts. And going through the pictures on their website, they do welt these with a machine, which is different because most of the time, if you see a Norwegian welt or Norwegian welt, it will be hand welted. But this is an example where it is not, and I think that that's an interesting shift in the way that you look at them. So if we look at the welt here, first of all, this is stitched into leather, and there is stitching that are into rubber soles. Okay, Paraboot is really well known for their rubber soles. They may actually be the origin of the rubber soled shoe, and you can see that there's some stitching here going into the sole. But then the majority of the stitching is actually going, and that's really hard to see because it's just dark brown against dark brown. But then here, this stitch here is going into the shoe through the welt. Okay. Now this is another thing that I think is really interesting, is there isn't always a welt. Okay. So a lot of times Norwegian welt is just the Norwegian stitches directly into the shoe. But for Paraboot, they actually do it through a welt that is then attached to what they stitch to the sole itself, and like you do with other shoes, they stitch into the rubber. So very, very cool, very different design. This is a 360-degree welt, and as you look here, just a really interesting example of how they do it. Now, there's another brand which does this, which is Bruno Molly. Okay, and what's interesting about Bruno Molly, and you can see here, they have the stitching that's going into the sole is much more clear, and then the stitching to the welt, you can see it uses a much broader stitch, right? So this is a pretty dense stitch pattern going into the sole. This is also on a rubber sole, but here you can see the stitching come through, right? So that's probably done with a regular stitch machine. But then here, and the stitching that's going into the shoe itself, also done by machine, right, through a welt. So a very interesting example of a classic design, right? Now, when you start getting away from the machine welts and you get into the hand welts, there are a lot of different designs, right? So we'll start with one that actually has a welt, and this is a Heinrich Dinkelacker, Budapest, and you can see this actually has 4 layers, 1, 2, or actually 5 layers of stitching, right? And this is done by hand. So this is this shoe is they use machines for the uppers, but they like a sewing machine. But the rest of this is made by hand, and you can see it's got a lot of nail work. I mean, it's a very nice classic shoe. but here they've got a brown, then a tan, then a brown in the middle, then a tan, and then a brown at the top. So 5 layers of stitches. It looks like it's woven because of the colors. You can actually tell that it's not. So very cool, and it's going through a welt, connecting the sole to the shoe. Now they're not always multicolored. This is in what they call carbon, which changes significantly in the light from almost a black to a silver to a brown, right? depending on the lighting. And for this particular color, and this was kind of a special thing that they did for Heinrich Dinkelacker, they chose this multicolor welt. Now I've seen this exact shoe like in burgundy as a burgundy shoe, and it just had black as the welt. So you just had 5 layers of black welting, okay? But beautiful stitching, absolutely outstanding. I've also seen this referred to as a Goiser welt, although I've not been able to find any definitive definition on the difference between a Norvegese, Goiser, or Norwegian welt. So there are obviously differences, but in terms of an authority in this, it can be a little bit hard to deal with. So it's just an area that we accept as being something a little bit esoteric. And so I try not to use the terms interchangeably, but forgive me if I do. Now this is a Meermin. This is part of the Lineo Maestro line of hand welted shoes. And this has a braided Norwegian welt, which you can see here, also 360. Okay, and this is on a leather sole with a blind stitch. Okay? And just a very cool look to it. A little different. I would call it a hole cut, except that it has a patch in the back instead of a single seam. So I'm not quite sure what to call it, but I always think of it as a hole cut. I'll probably even use it in my hole cut videos. And this is in Nature Calf. It's a beautiful shoe. And so that's the braided welt. And now we look at your classic 270s, okay? Now this is a suede example, and this is on a commando sole. And this has a groove on the stitch here. And if you look, this is an interesting example, right? This has stitching that goes through here into what looks like a storm welt or a split reverse welt, but the Norvegese stitching is above it, directly into the shoe. Now this is a Bontoni Quasimodo, and you can see that this is done by hand. It's not especially even. There's some imperfections in it, and not that that bothers me. And this is clearly done by hand. Just a different way of looking at it. I mean, this is kind of, I mean, if you look too close, it gets a little maddening. But you know, this is an absolutely beautiful shoe. It has almost like a saddle pattern up here in the suede, and then a split toe up here. Beautiful Norwegian split toe sewing here, all by hand on the apron. And what's funny about this is probably one of the lightest shoes I own with the trees in it. These trees are super light. Okay, I don't know if that's balsa, but I mean it weighs like nothing. The shoe itself is weighs hardly anything by itself, and even with the tree, is just super light. So Bontoni, great shoes. This awesome Vibram Commando sole on a split toe with these beautiful Norwegian welts. Okay. Now, price point for these is going to vary considerably. The Meermins are probably $350. The Paraboots probably $400-500. The Heinrich Dinkelackers are like $800-900. The Bontonis $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, something like that. These are about $1,300. This is a pair of Polo Sephoras, and this is a dress version of a similar shoe. It has a beautiful leather sole. and look at how even this is compared to that Bontoni. And this, in my mind, this is just dressier. And you know, Polo Sephora, it is exceptionally clean. Now this has a very long toe and a very rounded apron. And this is in Positano calf, which is very nice. Also a very, very light, light shoe, but probably 40% heavier than the Bontoni. Okay, so again, just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful example, and extremely even on the Norwegian welt. And then last, we're going to look at a 180. So the Bontoni and the Polo Sephora, these are 270 degree welts, right? Everything else was 360. So like all 270 degree welts, the heels are just formed under the shoe, right? So it's a thinner heel, and so they want to do that. But both of these have a substantial waist, right? But when you get to wanting to have a narrow waist and have a, and in some cases a fiddleback waist, you can't really go to 270 on the Norwegian stitch. So this is an example where they did what they call a 180. So the Norwegian stitching stops here, and then the waist is done differently. Now in this case, it's pegged. Okay, so it's got the pegs there. I have a pair of cowboy boots that's pegged. Lucchese does pegs. A number of the really good boot brands do. But this is the first brand of shoe that I have that does this. This is a St. Crispin's. Okay, sorry, I think if I do it this way, you can actually read it. Well, it's backwards, so I guess I have to do it this way. And it just looks backwards to me, but it'll probably look right to you. Again, look at this welt is perfect. And you know, I never noticed this before, but I think this has a very, very thin split reverse welt underneath the Norwegians, just like the Bontoni does. It is just 100% cleaner. Okay. Now, I did a lot of custom work on these shoes, so these were a little bit more expensive. But I think the list price on these is about 1,200 euros, so very similar to the Bontonis. But the you know, this is St. Crispin's, and they're a little bit, in my mind, a little bit nicer, but certainly up for grabs as far as that goes than the Bontoni or the Polo Sephora. So, but all very, very good shoes. So these are some of the best shoes money can buy, and when you look at these options, this is not a cheap option, especially you know, the ones that I showed later, because they're all made done by hand. It requires a lot of time. Some of these shoes are in excess of 40 hours to make. They say that, is it really 40 hours? Is it 40 hours when they take it and they put it down and then they pick it up again? You know, there's a lot of, you know, question about that. In general, I think a lot of these shops turn out you know, 10 to 12 pairs of shoes a day, per hour. It all changes dramatically depending on the story that they're telling. So it's very, very hard to tell, right? But so I don't want to like quote those statistics and really not know. And I don't really know because I'm not a shoemaker and I've never sat in the factory and I've never watched all the different pieces that go into it. And candidly, I don't think many people do outside the folks who work there, because nobody's going to sit there and watch 40 hours. So suffice it to say, it takes a long time to make. It requires a lot of skill. If they mess up, they have to start over again. They have to get new leather. That's really expensive, right? So they don't like to do that. So this is something that they spend a lot of time on. They take a lot of pride in, and that's really what you pay for when you're looking at the premium shoes, is the time that they take to make the shoes, you know, perfect. So that is my thought on Norwegian welts. I hope you found this helpful. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you think, hey, John, you just did too many videos today, you gotta like take a break and stop overwhelming us, totally fine. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And I appreciate it so much that you're watching. Thanks again.